Joining us now to break down the response to COVID-19 is Cassie Smedile, the Deputy Communications Director for the Republican National Committee. So, Cassie, over the past couple of weeks, we've seen the American people, through polls, show that they're largely on board with the president's response so far to the COVID outbreak. What does this say about his re-election efforts, then, going into November?
Right. Well, it certainly has been a tremendous help, not just for the country, but also as we look towards November, to have the president in the American people's homes every day, 7 days a week, offering his leadership and the latest on this pandemic that's plaguing our country right now. But what we've also seen that translate into on the campaign side is, now remember, we've switched to a completely virtual campaign situation, but we've had over 275,000 new volunteers join our operation since we started work from home in the middle of March. And that shows you that people are responding to the leadership they're seeing from the president every single day, and they know that that's the leadership we need in our country for 4 more years.
And of course, on the other side of that coin, we see Joe Biden coming out and saying that he's the leader for this time. We saw a recent ad that he put out kind of highlighting the differences between his approach, or what would be an approach to the pandemic, compared to the words that President Trump has been using. And we know that the Trump campaign has put out different ads countering that narrative. But how do you plan to do that moving forward with something that you can only expect to see more and more from the Biden campaign?
Well, Democrat PR companies cannot change the reality of what you get when Joe Biden actually talks. And that's that the only proposals he's offered have been things that the president has already done. He finally apologized for repeatedly calling the president xenophobic when the president rightfully blocked travel from China once we knew that was the source of this coronavirus. And he finally just apologized for that. And then on top of that, you look back at his record. When Joe Biden was vice president, the Obama administration had to come out and just fall all over themselves to apologize for some of the comments that Joe Biden had made about H1N1, because it was the wrong answer, it was the wrong response, the wrong tone for the country at the time. So we have a long list of any number of gaffes that Joe Biden has made over his long political career. And then we also have more recent examples where Joe Biden just can't seem to get it together.
I'm glad you brought up Joe Biden's record, because it's kind of interesting to me when you look back on it. For example, he voted for NAFTA. He voted for the Iraq War. He's voted for cutting Social Security in the past, or at least expressed his willingness to do so. And to me, it seems that he is the epitome of the same type of policies that were rejected in 2016, or those neoliberal, globalist continuation of the Obama presidency type of policies. But now he's winning in the primaries pretty heavily. Is this a different political environment now than it was in 2016?
Well, I do think that it is different because President Trump has made it different. President Trump has shown the American people that their voice and their vote matters, which is interesting that the Democrat Party and the DNC and Joe Biden have all gotten together to say the establishment knows best. I mean, if you looked at what the will of today's Democrat Party is, it's very far left. Bernie Sanders' policy proposals are center norm in today's Democrat Party. Joe Biden has so much as adopted all of them. And yet the supporters of the Bernie movement or revolution seem to be outcasts within today's Democrat Party, because the party itself got together and selected Joe Biden as their nominee. It wasn't necessarily the will of so many voters.
I think this is going to be a very overlooked portion of this campaign, too, because if you look back to 2016, the lack of support from Bernie Sanders supporters may have cost Hillary Clinton the election. It was something between 15 and 20% of Bernie Sanders supporters in the primary either didn't turn out for Hillary Clinton or voted against her. And now we see the same thing taking shape in 2020. So do you think that there will be an outreach by the Republican Party to maybe meet in the middle for some of these voters on things that they could see both ways on? That being maybe disrupting the status quo, trade relations, anything like that?
Well, we know writ large, voters, Americans, we want our elected officials to fight for us. And we saw in 2016, and we've seen in the time since, that the American people feel that in President Donald Trump. We've had thousands of people who are registered Democrats, lifelong Democrat voters, who have joined our movement. Either they've shown up to rallies, or they've donated to us, or now they're part of some of those 275,000 new volunteers that we've seen come into our movement just in the last month. And that is because every day the American people see a president fighting for them. And then conversely, what you see on the left, if it's not the far left socialist policies that have you concerned, it's the lack of leadership, the lack of leader from Joe Biden that has people concerned. And that's why we feel confident about our prospects in November, and also our ability to harness that support, those supporters for President Trump and Republicans.
And Cassie, a lot of conservatives were eager to have Senator Bernie Sanders on the top of the ticket. They knew that it would be an easy differentiation to compare President Trump and Senator Bernie Sanders, just saying he's a socialist, he's got all these policies that would hurt Americans, middle-class Americans. That was kind of the idea that the Republicans were looking to capitalize on, not only on the presidential ticket, but then down-ticket ballots as well, tying those candidates to Senator Bernie Sanders. Now that it's Joe Biden, a guy who perceives himself to be a little bit more of a centrist, more of a moderate, does the strategy change anymore when it comes to those down ballot voters?
Well, he might perceive himself, but that is certainly not what he has put out there to the American people. I mean, you're right. A year or so ago, we thought Bernie Sanders was the only socialist in this race. But since then, Joe Biden has acquiesced to nearly every far left policy proposal. Open borders, higher taxes for every American, Medicare for all of those things Joe Biden is fully on board with. He has said as much. They are two sides of the same radical coin. And to that point, we can't, as Republicans, just breathe a sigh of relief that the socialists didn't get in the race or didn't end up with the nomination. We know we still have a socialist Democrat as our opponent. And that's why it's as important as ever, not only to ensure that he doesn't get to the White House, but we also know there's a lot of socialists in Congress right now. And we need to make sure that we elect as many Republicans, pro-free market Republicans, as possible to counter this surge of socialism in today's Democrat Party.
And to that point, Joe Biden is running on the most progressive platform of any president in history. It's something that we overlook just because he's now considered to be the centrist. But if President Obama would have run on the same exact agenda, that would have been very progressive as well. But I mean, now in hindsight, Obama's agenda looks very conservative, if you will, moderate compared to what Joe Biden is putting out there. And a lot of people saying, too, that because he's been on the wrong side when it comes to his record on NAFTA, Iraq, he's going to rely more on his aides, meaning it might not be Joe Biden making the actual decisions, but those advising him behind the scenes. But Cassie, I appreciate you coming on, breaking down the elections, coronavirus, all these complicated issues. Thank you very much.